Welcome to Summit University. Today our guest is Steven Acuff. He's a best-selling author and lecturer on health and diet in Europe and the United States. Mr. Acuff specializes in the macrobiotic diet. He is an instructor at the Cushy Institutes in Massachusetts and a nutritional counselor at a medical clinic in Germany. He is also director of a macrobiotic center in Sweden. Mr. Acuff is here today to talk about Oriental diagnosis.
In the last session, we took up the subject of the hands, both the constitution and the condition. And just to speak shortly about one last aspect of the hands, which was not covered. Some people are curious about the circulatory line, the heart line, which runs up close to the fingers of the two. We have the lifeline, we have the headline, the lifeline, of course, showing us our physical strength, symbolized by the digestive tract. We have, with the headline, then, our nervous system, and the one coming from the outside edge of the hand up towards the fingers is the heart line. And this one is a mixture of the two. So it's not important to distinguish between hands here. That's why I didn't mention it. So with the hands, we then have seen constitution and condition. Redness, as we've had before, is practically always a sign of strong yin. Red shows an expansion of our blood vessels, making the blood more visible at the surface. So reddish hands, which are very common, are a sign of strong yin. Now often, we'll see it like this. People who have some strong yin, but not masses, will be reddish in this area, the fingertips. You'll see that the fingertips have a different color than the rest of the hand. They're red. This is somewhat too yin. Other people, you'll see that the fingers basically are red, but the hand is not the same color. It's more fleshy color. Then the hand itself may be red. But what you always see is just at the point where the hand ends and the wrist begins, this is where the red stops. And the amount of redness is related to the amount of yin. So some people have very red hands, very puffy, wet hands, all these signs of strong yin. Sometimes it's only along the edge of the hand where it's pronounced red, just along the edge here. If we think about the flow of the acupuncture meridian, we have the heart meridian, which we discussed in the last session, here on the inside part of the little finger, but actually goes up on the inside on the palm. And when this is all red here, but the rest of the hand isn't, this could give us some insight into strong yin in the condition of the circulatory system. Now, a complement to the hands are the feet, for our purposes, evaluating the health. Because the feet are low as opposed to out, they have what we call a more yang position, more down. And yang excess will easily show on the feet. So things like bunions and corns and generally hard, callous feet that also have a strong yellow color, those are signs of yang. If you have a lot of calluses on your feet, hardness, it's very good to try to get rid of those through rubbing. Like there's little stones that you can just use, very lightly abrasive, especially after a bath or shower. It's a time when it softens up some, because these calluses are interrupting the flow of energy through the body. If you have calluses here very strong on the side of your toe, which many people do, then as the acupuncture energy flows through the toe, it will get blocked. And this blocking is dangerous to your health. It brings you easily out of balance. So getting rid of calluses is a good thing to do. Some people will generally have spots on the feet. Sometimes they're white spots. You see white spots on people's feet, very dense kind of white spots, very clearly defined. This is a sign that the body is trying to discharge excess dairy food. Milk, cheese, yogurt, everybody's favorites. Ice cream. In general, too much dairy food. Dairy food has some interesting aspects. On the one hand, it has a yinness when it's in the form of ice cream or butter, but it is in any case saturated fat, cholesterol, and it is from animal sources, and it does have a yang side, and it easily moves down. So this is also a major cause of calluses. Now again, as I mentioned in the session on hands, getting calluses is not a problem. That's a very natural thing. It's the way the foot protects itself from constant wear. But it's the kind of callus that develops that is the question. Is it a clear hardening, or is it something that turns yellow and gets very thick? So here we can also look at the acupuncture meridians. For example, on the outside of the big toe, we have the so-called spleen pancreas meridian. The spleen and pancreas form one energetic entity. And this, if you see hard calluses along here on people that, as I say, get very thick. Some people think it's just because they're wearing tight shoes. But one person wears tight shoes and the toes form one way. Other people wear tight shoes, they form another way. First of all, it's good not to wear a lot of tight shoes. But sometimes we wear them anyway. In any case, when calluses form here, we have a sign that spleen-pancreas energy is out of balance. It can show us there might be some tightness going on in the pancreas. Pancreas getting too yang. On the inside of the big toe, we have the liver. Liver energy here. So, sometimes there'll be hardness forming on this side, but not so much on this side. This would speak more for liver. Often people will take off their shoes and say, what does this mean? You look at their foot and you'll see a hardened area somewhere here. It's very easy. You just think of the acupuncture meridians and you can give them a pretty good clue. There's some liver disturbance going on. This is liver acupuncture point number 1. This is where the liver energy starts. Then the second and third toe both are stomach. The stomach meridian actually branches so that this one meridian has two toes. Some people have a second toe which extends beyond the big toe. This is a sign of constitutional yin weakness in the stomach energy. So these would be people who should also especially chew well, eat their foods in a more meditative state, not hectically thinking about what they have to do after lunch. They should not take a lot of cold drinks, ice cold drinks, which is very popular in the USA, drinking ice cold things. Be very careful, because ice cold things have a paralyzing effect on stomach energy. The fourth toe is related to the gallbladder. So often people will get little like sores or something on this fourth toe. They'll ask me, why do I have always this problem only on the fourth toe? And the answer is that their gallbladder function is out of balance. Now the gallbladder and liver are related. They together form one energy unit. And sometimes things that are showing up in the gallbladder will actually be coming from the liver. So we don't want to see this too analytically. Say, I've got something wrong with my gallbladder, but my liver's okay. Because the gallbladder is a very passive organ. The gallbladder does nothing else than store bile, basically. It's the liver that's doing all the work. And the gallbladder is like an extension of the liver. So problems coming out of the gallbladder energy are always related to the liver. Then we move on to the little toe. And here, an acupuncture meridian coming along the outside of the foot is the bladder. The bladder meridian is very important. First of all, it's the longest meridian on the body. It's got 60 points. There's no other meridian that can claim 60 points. It starts up here in the corners of the eye and goes all the way to the little toe. And on the way, it passes through the so-called U points along the outside edges of your spinal column. And these U points, YU, U points are the energy entrance points, which form the basis of your acupuncture energy. So the bladder meridian has an importance which goes far beyond just the organ bladder. Again, the bladder is, just like the gallbladder, basically a passive organ. It is there as an extension of the kidneys. So bladder problems usually are a sign that something's out of order in the kidney energy. So instead of dividing things up analytically, which is the Western tendency, we try always to be thinking about holistic concepts. We try to think about what is combining, what belongs together. That's the most important thing for us, because it will always end up with an unsatisfactory explanation of what's going on in our bodies if we focus too much just on one organ. There's always other things involved. We get problems because a whole body functions and systems get out of balance. But if we get a lot of calluses here, or anywhere along here disturbances, this will give us some idea about kidney bladder energy. The kidney meridian actually starts on the bottom of the foot, like the sole of the foot. You wouldn't be able to see it on this foot, but it's right about here on the bottom of the foot. You can look at acupuncture charts and follow these meridians. They're very easy to learn. You can learn them very quickly. What I find especially helpful in learning the paths of the meridians is to get a little doll. They're imported from China. It's about this tall, and it's three-dimensional, so you can really see where the meridians go. On charts, you can get thrown off a little bit by the two-dimensional thing, like where exactly is that point. And these little dolls, which are sold in shops which sell acupuncture needles and things like that in big cities, or you can sometimes get them in alternative shops that sell esoteric books and things like that. So this is the basis for the foot. Now, a couple of very easy things to see on the foot when you look at it, first of all, is to see if the person has flat feet. Very quick. Because now we can see something very conditional. Having flat feet is, as you can imagine, this expansion, puffiness, which takes away that firmness which creates an arch. So flat feet are a sign of 2 yin. It's not something that you're just born with and you have to live with the rest of your life, but it is something you can actively influence by your food choices and by physical exercise and such things which make us more yang. So flat feet are yin. A good arch, firm arch, is a sign of more yang. But the feet are especially good, as I said before, for seeing yang excess because this tends to go down. Also, your feet are moving all day. The rest of your body is more stationary. The feet are moving. Movement we call yang. Passivity, not moving, we call yin. So, lower part of the body, the legs and the feet, always moving, more yang. And we'll see different things appear. Now, when I started eating macrobiotic food over 20 years ago, we had very little information and there were very few people that knew much about this. Like in this seminar, you're learning more than I learned in 5 years. And I experimented and came to certain conclusions. I found things out, but I made some mistakes that nobody could really help me with because I had nobody to ask. What I did was I ate too much salt, which is a typical mistake. Salty condiments taste delicious. They make food, which can be bland otherwise, like just eating grains by themselves can taste bland. We put condiments on them and they taste good. So I overdid it with the salty condiments. Fortunately, I had no physical ailments, so I didn't really notice it. Except that I found that I like to drink liquid or take yin because a lot of salt makes you thirsty. But then, after some years, I met my wife, who had been macrobiotic about as long as I had, actually a little longer. And the first thing she said to me was, "You use a lot of salt." And when she started cooking for me, the first thing she did was throw me out of the kitchen. And I haven't found my way back in since. Somewhere along the line, I lost the leadership in this relationship, and I'm not exactly sure when it happened. But I think it was on one of my lecture tours. In any case, she started cooking for me, and my salt consumption immediately dropped to a fraction of what it had been before. This was after some years. And after, I think, maybe 3 or 4 months of eating her food, I suddenly got a very thick yellow callus here. It stuck up very high, just more and more and more. And so I would scrape it off, like with a dull knife. After a shower, I would just take a dull like butter knife and just scrape it. I would get a whole handful of skin. And then I would watch, a couple weeks later, it would be back again. Just kept going. Then I became curious, what would happen if I don't scrape it off? what happened was it was so dry and so hard and kept getting bigger that it cracked. It was a slight bleeding, uncomfortable. So I continued scraping and scraping. This went on for almost 2 years. For almost 2 years, this kept flowing out. And I was thinking, well, what is going on here? I've been eating good food for so long. What's going on? And then I realized what was going on. This happened only on my right foot. My left foot was perfectly normal. Can you imagine what happened? Salt. By taking so much salt in the first years, I had basically blocked my liver energy. If we think about a concept we talked about yesterday in a session, this was that the liver is a right side organ nourished by Earth's force. Nourished by Earth's force. Salt is what we call yang or heaven's force and blocks this. So by taking a lot of salty food, even though I was eating basically nutritionally sound food, by taking too much salt, I was constantly blocking my liver energy. So suddenly my liver was given a release because now I was eating the food, less salty. I was eating food which basically is very good for liver recovery. And so my body immediately began throwing off all the things that I had accumulated in the 25 years before that. Because basically with the salt I just locked everything in. As I say, it was just my good luck that I was not physically ill so that I didn't really notice what I was doing to myself. I was just blocking all of my improvement. And after about 2 years, it just gently faded away. So that now for several years I've had nothing on my toe. Now my right toe looks like my left toe. But sometimes I would look at my right toe and I'd say, like, what is this? You know, when it first came out, I was wondering. And then I looked at it and I thought, this toe doesn't look like a human toe. There's so much of this hard stuff on there. It's almost as if this was like an animal's claw or something. And I was thinking, maybe this is a discharge of animal food. Because I used to eat standard diet everybody eats, meat every day, cheese, eggs, lots of things that burden the liver. And when I switched over, my body released it. So that now I would say that my liver is much more imbalanced than before, and we can even press the liver under the rib cage and test it. We've talked about this before. We can feel, is it flexible or is it expanded? Is it hard? So lots of things can happen on the feet in the form of discharge. For me, it was very obvious it was yang discharge. Also the fact that the liver is a right side organ, that this energy was much more focused to my right toe and that practically nothing on my left toe, although acupuncture meridians are all two-sided. They're bilateral. There's an acupuncture meridian on the right toe for the liver and one on the left toe. So we look at the feet, and also people that get very sweaty feet or feet that have a strong odor. This is signs of discharge. The body is trying to discharge something through the feet. It's usually strong yang. It's interesting, when people have smelly, sweaty feet, in German these are called cheese feet. Kind of interesting. They call them cheese feet. They kind of remind you of cheese a little bit. One other sign of liver disorder can be if this large toenail, the big toenail, becomes white. It doesn't have a transparent color, like you're not seeing the pink underneath, but rather it becomes like an opaque, whitish, yellowish color. It usually has not just white, but has a strong yellowish tinge to it. This is a sign that the liver is definitely not doing well. And people who have those kind of toenails should be very, very careful with eating animal food because the liver can get very ill. So now that we've talked about the feet and the hands, we can take up the subject of nails. Our nails are constantly being renewed. So they're a very good barometer of our current condition. If the nail is smooth and firm, then this is a sign of good health. It's a sign that the body is absorbing nutrients and we're in balance. What I noticed when I switched over to this kind of food was that my toenails and fingernails, all of my nails, suddenly were twice as thick as they were before. I found out how long it takes for nails to grow because I could follow it. My nails from the side look like this. As it grew out, it became thicker and thicker. It took about 6 months for my big toes to have normal nails. Before that, it was just boom, like that. It took about 3 to 4 months for the hands. I was fascinated by such things. Really discovered one of the secrets of life. And if we have very weak nails, the kind that break easily, or that are very, like, almost as thin as paper, a little bit exaggerated, but very thin, then we have some problems. These can be different problems. We can be having some absorption problems. Very clear sign that our intestines are not absorbing the food well or that the food quality is not proper. When I did a tour of Japan a few years ago, I was forced to eat in restaurants for a longer period of time than I've ever had to do since I began eating this kind of food. I was eating in restaurants. I was eating a lot of polished white rice instead of natural rice. I can still remember the 4 times that I got natural rice during that tour, and I loved each time. But when I came home, my nails looked like this from the side. They just, like going across this way, they were just ridges. I could see the times when I was eating better and the times I was eating worse. Normally I have very smooth nails. After this trip, I had very uneven nails. And when I came back home and then was, again, very consistent with my food, they became smooth again. Also interesting for me was that on this tour, I developed a skin rash, eczema. Developed eczema, which took me about 6 or 8 weeks to get rid of after the tour. So as I said in a previous session, some people consider this to be a disadvantage, that your body shows these things so quickly. You eat improper food, your body reports that back to you immediately. But I see it as a very positive sign. It's showing that my body is throwing things off. It's not internalizing the problem, but it's bringing it to the surface and trying to get rid of it. So it's a sign of health that we can throw things off. Our problems get serious when they get locked in, and people will say, I can eat anything, and it doesn't matter, I don't feel anything, I don't, have any problems, everything is fine. This is really a sign of locking things in, and the problems brew and get bigger. So that's one thing. Then sometimes you'll see white spots develop. These are sometimes very embarrassing for people who know about diagnosis methods because it shows you may be binging on sweet things that you don't want to tell other people about. Because when you take strong sweets, this causes an immediate acid reaction. And the acid reaction will demineralize your body, and the demineralization will leave its trace on your nails as a white spot. Sweets is not the only way you can do it. Also taking white flour products which are also very acid forming and very demineralizing. Taking white flour products, white bread, white noodles, these will also give the white spots. So when you look at someone's hand, check to see if there are white spots here and there. Very interesting. But they grow out, and if you're eating very well, you'll see that the white spots gradually disappear. Some people can get them from eating excessive protein. If you eat too much protein, now this normally means animal food, but we can also eat too much vegetable quality protein. We can eat too much tofu, which is a delicious product, but should be enjoyed in moderate quantities. It's very rich, very strong food. It's an extract from the soybean, so we don't take large quantities. People generally are very protein fixated. So when they change their food habits, they'll take this much whole grain, this much vegetables, and this much tofu, because it's like that which kind of replaces what's missing. But that's the wrong way to do it. It may be necessary the first few days because you're in a transition, but in the long run, you should be careful of these protein-rich dishes and take them as a smaller side dish. Maybe have them more than once during the day so that you don't have to overdo it once, because smaller quantities during the day will have a less acid-forming or dramatic acid-forming effect on you because it doesn't come all at once. In any case, the demineralization, which happens from acid excess, can show itself in this way. So by eating seaweeds, which are very rich in minerals, we can prevent weakness in the nails. This weakness can be weakness related to sugar, to refined foods, which is causing spots, or it can be eating inferior quality, nutritionally inferior foods, which aren't giving us everything we need, and our nails are soft, or very brittle, or break easily, or flake off. So we can also see intestinal strength. When I see someone who has very soft, thin nails, usually my first reaction is to look at the face and see how the mouth looks, the lips. From a previous session, you remember that we talked about the lips, and especially the lower lip, corresponding to the intestinal condition. And it's interesting to connect those with weak nails and intestinal weakness. They go very closely together. So the nails should be firm. They should have the normal pinkish color without a lot of ridges, waves, spots, and sometimes little holes develop, just little, like almost if someone had taken a pen and stuck in there. And this may be a sign of intestinal worms, because intestinal worms draw the nutrition away from you. They absorb it. They're parasites. They're drawing it to themselves, and it will leave a trace in your fingernails. Your fingernails won't have that clear, nutritionally sound appearance. It's interesting that worms, intestinal worms, are a bigger problem for people who eat mainly raw foods, because the eggs of these worms are killed by cooking. But if you eat a lot of raw foods, you're more likely to get them. In the Far East, people have never eaten raw foods. They may eat it in a transformed raw. They will pickle it, or they will just press it with salt in some way to change it, because of hygienic reasons. They were always skeptical of just eating raw foods, because in the East it's very high population density and hygienic problems. So those are some of the most important aspects for the foot. for the nails, for the hands. We have very good diagnostic tools here to work with. Different parts of the body. And we can use this information then to see how we're doing. So let's go over now to a little practical work. And I have two different ideas in mind for how we can do this practical work. I would like to continue, as we did in previous sessions, to have people come forward and we'll take a look at them so that you can learn more about evaluating other people's health conditions. But for a lot of these more detailed things, this kind of format is just not optimal. And the best thing to do is to form into small groups and look at each other. Now with a larger group, it's difficult for me to go around and really check everybody closely to give my input into it. But you can see very quickly when you absorb this information, very quickly on the people around you, you'll see a lot of these things I'm talking about. You'll see the white spots on the nails, you'll see the uneven nails, you'll see calluses, and all these things, and you learn from seeing it. So I would propose that we now try the first method again, and that in another session we'll go over to looking at ourselves. And for those who see this on video afterwards and don't have the opportunity to be here for the original, I would suggest that these viewers look at other people, just a small group. It can be your family, it can be a group of friends, but use any opportunity to look at people. You'll find that they become very interested when they see that you want to check them out. How are they doing? But if you see extreme signs of health, always be very careful in the way you present this, because you can sometimes shock people very much. And this, of course, is not a technique to use as a party entertainment or something, because you can really scare people with it. Because when you have the opportunity to absorb the spirit of what I'm saying, then we can talk about all kinds of heart problems and things, and we know that we don't need to take this so seriously, because we're talking about improvement, of supporting our bodies, striving for health. But when it's taken out of context, especially in the general population where there's a lot of fear, we can make people really scared. So we're always very careful in the way we present some of these things, because we can't even imagine how that will hit like a bomb and actually bring about the opposite of what we had in mind, which was helping people, making them more aware. So now what we'll do is have someone come forward, and then we can use the information of everything we've had up to now. That means looking at the face, looking at the hands, and I will check the shoulders and things like that, all these techniques that we've used up to now, so you'll get some more practice with it. Okay, you would like to come forward? Okay, please stand there. Okay, so when you take your first look here through your magic spectacles, the basic constitution, do you think this is more compact, what we call yang, or is it more expanded in yin? Okay, so we see we have different opinions here. Let's take a look at the hands, see how they look. So this hand, would you say those are shorter or longer fingers? They're shorter. For a woman, is that a broad or a narrow hand? More broad. Now let's come back to something we did in a previous session and think about an energy which is hovering at the surface of the face. Do you have the feeling that the characteristics of her face are being more pulled together, or are they being pulled apart? Okay, my impression is that her basic constitution is somewhat more yang than yin. But the people who said yin weren't totally wrong, because there are some yin aspects. Her eyes tend to be very far apart, or let's say not very far apart, but wider than they would be if she had a more consistent yang constitution. So then, now going to check here in the shoulders, shoulder area, and along the back. So it's a little difficult to find the vertebrae here. Also very difficult to get my hand under the scapula. In fact, it's impossible. Okay, so there's a lot of hardness here. Okay, let's take a look at the side. So this is more of a yang style of the jaw, more clearly contoured. The ear, there is a lobe there. Let's now take a look at your lifeline. Take a look at the right side. Now, her lifeline has a very clear fork right here. It is, I would say, like of average. When you look at several, you get an idea of what is average. But it has a fork here showing that she is prone to health problems, not immediately, but a little later on. We would say like maybe 50, 60 years old, something along there. So if she starts now, taking good care of herself, then this potential is neutralized, has no meaning. What kind of food do you eat?
Until a month ago, a lot of everything.
And now for a month you've been eating much better?
No meat, and trying to stay away from the rice stream. But pretty good.
Okay. Yeah, rice dream is an ice cream substitute made out of sweet rice, amasake, and rice malt. And it's a pretty good substitute when you feel a craving for it. In Europe, we don't have rice dream. And this means that some people lose control and find themselves in an ice cream shop and they eat it before they come to their senses. But I always have the impression that in the U.S., the development is always a little ahead of the rest of the world, because that's really what's needed, is a macrobiotic quality ice cream. Of course, when we come back to what I spoke about earlier, if you eat cold things, you will tend to slow down your stomach energy, and because the spleen pancreas is related to the stomach, you will also give some negative input to that energy, but still, it's a pretty good substitute. And we have to remember that we're dealing with people and not machines, and that some people really need a transitional period before they really feel comfortable with totally new food. Food transition is not something you accomplish in one day. So we want to be very nice to ourselves and not be too hard if we don't live up to the expectations of the optimal. But we always keep a clear line of where we're going with it. So we say, you know, that is, it's not optimal, but it's certainly something that will help take care of cravings, which happen. So that's okay. So now, what's really important here is that, like we've seen before, that a lot of excess animal food, which sits very deep and has created a lot of hardness. I'll check the Achilles here. So this feels good. It's very firm. Now, she's got a little bit of discoloration under the eyes.
No makeup.
No makeup, that's great. She's very brave. Oh, here without any makeup. So we can see that she has some signs of kidney stress because this color is a little dark. But it's not a real serious problem. When I feel the Achilles tendon and feel that she doesn't have the usual swollenness there when people have extreme kidney problems, I wouldn't consider that to be one of the major aspects for her. However, what I would especially talk to her about, it's maybe difficult for some people to see this from the distance, is that the area of the sexual organs, in other words, uterus, ovaries, this area is an area which can become problematic for her in the future.
It has been.
It has been?
Problematic.
Tell us about it.
Well,
Well, you know, as much as
no,
is socially acceptable.
I've recently had some fibroid cysts removed,
Fibroid cysts.
and I had an erosion in the entrance of the uterus, which was too big for somebody my age to be really good.
Okay, so these are some real problems in the uterus. When you get fibroid cysts, this is a sign the uterus is totally out of balance. The body is choosing the uterus as the place to store the excess. That's where the fibroid cysts come from. And hardening in the uterus comes especially from excess protein together with fat. And we know that the animal food, that means not only the meat but also the milk and products made out of milk that come from animals, that this is especially detrimental for the female organs because they're high in both fat and protein, very little carbohydrate. The proper food for human beings as basic food is carbohydrates, not highly refined but unrefined carbohydrates. If you look at the biological composition of the body, it's very obvious that complex carbohydrates are supposed to be our major food. And unfortunately today is becoming less and less that, although we see a certain trend with the so-called natural food movement or natural food interest that's increasing. So it's very interesting that, again, we get a good confirmation that what we see on the face has actually happened. Now, what I have seen happen through the years is that women who get fibroid cysts are able to get rid of them, most of them, if they eat a very consistent macrobiotic diet. For the first couple of months, maybe totally free of anything that has an animal source, eating only vegetable quality food. But that may be after a transitional period, depending on how balanced you can go through that. So for her, this is a very important thing because the women that I have experienced that don't do something about this, they are really moving fast towards hysterectomies, having the uterus removed. And it doesn't have to be. One of the big problems can be if these fibroid cysts get bigger and bigger is that bleeding starts, so that the doctor really has no choice. You know, because the loss of blood will be so great that he'll say, you know, you have to do something about this. And if you wait until they're very big and bleeding, then you'll probably go along with the operation. If you start at an early phase, at a young age, you can really reverse that. And I have seen so many cases of it, I know it's possible. But especially keeping the protein amount, and that means not only animal protein, which is of course the major cause, but when you've got it, then being very careful with vegetable quality protein. You have to go a fine balance here. You have to have enough to satisfy your needs. If you find yourself getting hungry all the time, you're trying to eat the optimal food, but you're hungry all the time, then you probably need to eat some more protein. Or it might be some more oil. You have to get, in any case, richer food. If you find that you do well with little protein, then that's fine. Normally, men need more protein than women. Women do better with very simple food in general. Men use more calories than women do. About 20% more calorie consumption, men than women. So, of course, men are going to be more attracted to rich foods. But around the area of the mouth, you can see some very clear signs. And as I mentioned yesterday, now during the lunch hour and stuff, you can take a quick peek at her if you, from your distance, can't see this. But she has very classic signs of developing problems in the uterus. And the good news is that she can do something about it. The other thing is that many women that I have experienced who get breast cancer are women who have had fibroid cysts. And it happens because problems of the female area and the breast both are related, just generally speaking now, are related to female hormones. That's why men in general don't get breast cancer. You know, women get it because it's related to estrogens. And men don't get it because their estrogen level is so low. Women who have high estrogen level get more breast cancer than women who have low estrogen level. That's why when you get breast cancer, the doctor will give you anti-estrogen therapy, because every doctor knows that a lower estrogen level is very beneficial for life expectancy. So it's problem related, and this is, you can't see it from your distance, but if you look closely, and it's good she has no makeup, otherwise I wouldn't pick up on this, but if you look closely at her, you'll see that she has the beginning of the redness in the cheek, showing that her breast area is another problem zone, and that the cause of the fibroid cysts is something much deeper, and it's actually only showing itself as the cysts. And it can then show itself in other ways too. So I'll have a woman before me, and we see that 15 years ago she had a hysterectomy, and then she thought the problem was over, and now she's sitting before me because she has breast cancer. And if she had only understood these things, she would not have wasted all these years of assuming that you can continue the way you've been doing. The very basis of macrobiotic thinking is this, that the body wants to be healthy. If you cut your hand, immediately healing process is set in. And it's not a doctor or anybody else who heals the hand. The hand heals itself. It's the same kind of energy that will make a plant grow out of a seed. It's just in that seed is a pre-programmed set to make a plant out of that. All it needs is the proper water, proper nourishment from the earth, sunshine, and it just happens. It's the same thing with the human body. It's like a seed. Everything is pre-programmed for long life. The body is totally set up to repair itself, and anything that gets out of balance, the body immediately tries to bring back into balance. So you cut yourself, and immediately the knitting together starts. What happens with diabetic people? Diabetic people heal very slowly because the diabetes has slowed down their whole repair mechanism, their whole health. And so a diabetic can cut himself and spend weeks trying to get rid of it. Whereas the healthy person in 2-3 days hardly knows he had the cut. That repair is there, and what we're doing is trying to support the body's own natural healing functions. And this is the same whether it's a cut, whether it's a fibroid cyst, or anything else. I have experienced people who have been terminal stage cancer and who have recovered. They have recovered from, they've been given the word that they have anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks left to live. And their bodies still have this recuperative power, and they switch over to a program which does optimal support of the body's immune function, and they find out that this body still has this incredible power to recover. So all we have to do is figure out what is the plan behind this. Like how do we adjust our life so that we're moving with the greater flow and not against it? When she gets fibroid cysts, first of all, just intuitively, if you look at her, she looks like she's got just excess, right? Now, for the average eye, someone would say, no, she actually looks good. Like that's like an average weight. From my point of view, using my system of measurement, she's too heavy. She has a lot of excess. The original Chinese had a word for how we live in harmony with Tao. You may know the word Tao. The Tao is what in macrobiotics is sometimes called the order of the universe. It's the greater energy that's keeping order in the whole universe. And in China, the idea of Tao was that we should try to live as much as possible in harmony with this flow. It's a flow of energy from the universe. And by living in harmony with the Tao, we could have a long life. For instance, in the old Chinese text, you can read, "Is it all right for a woman to give birth to her first child after the age of 40? And the physician with the Tao tradition says, "It's all right for a woman who is living according to the Tao." In other words, she's living in harmony with the greater flow. The way most people live is what the Chinese call resistance. It's like resisting. So when you resist, you automatically get out of balance with this greater flow. So the way of Tao was also called the way of non-resistance. Don't resist. Go with the flow instead of resisting it. So her body was created for reproductive purposes. That's the whole point. You give life on to other beings, and the human development continues. And now in this very critical area of reproduction, she is now resisting, of course, without realizing. She doesn't know the rules yet of how the Tao works. She's resisting that, and so a blockage has come up. This blockage is in the uterus area. So instead of thinking about removing it or operations, our first idea is, how can she now rearrange her life so that she now moves with the greater flow, and then the blockage is unraveled, and then the body has this recuperative power to repair the damage. And very often, these things will disappear. So it's good fortune. Now, because she needs to discharge generally, we've focused on the problem she has. It's something you can see on the face. But if you remember from a previous session, I told you that when you get problems in the uterus, you should always think about which organ? The liver. Because the liver is the guiding organ. So breathe in and out. How old are you?
23.
23.
I had hepatitis when I was little.
Ah. Okay. She's got a very hard liver for 23 years old. Very hard. But she can change that. So the liver, even though we don't see anything here, if you remember from our diagnosis, we talked about showing the liver here. Well, at her age, it's just not showing. If a person 70 years old stands here, then you'll see the liver lines more, because of course you get more lines the longer you live. But at her young age, the skin has not yet come so far that it's getting that inner drying out that happens to start showing them. She still has this the youthful excess. So we don't see it, but by using the combinations that we've thought about, like what's going on if someone gets fibroid cysts, then we can automatically think about the liver, because we know that goes together. Now, she just told me she had hepatitis when she was young. Hepatitis is a lifelong problem, basically. Your liver, after hepatitis, is never again the way it was before. It doesn't mean it is seriously out of order, but it's never really full power. So people who have had hepatitis should be very gentle with the liver. Treat the liver nice. So, what she needs to do is generally get rid of hardness, the deep accumulations that we can feel in this area. The liver is hard. And if you remember what we talked about discharge, that means being especially careful with salty foods, being careful with hard-baked flour things, cookies and all that kind of stuff. And to be especially careful not to take dairy food. Dairy food is really something that comes from behind. In my book, I describe dairy food as the Trojan horse of health foods. You know the story of the Trojan horse, how it just was brought into the fortress without anybody realizing what was inside the Trojan horse? That was the enemy was in the horse. And when they brought the horse in and the people were sleeping, they all came out and, you know the story. This is what happens with dairy food. We get rid of meat and think now we've gotten rid of the problem. And we continue with dairy food as a substitute, which in its consistency, or let's say in its composition is the better word, in its composition is not so much different from meat. It's high in fat, it's high in cholesterol, it's high in animal protein, and it's not proper as a daily food. So that's especially important. I find women who get these problems in general really like dairy food. So no more dairy food, and then you've got the good basis for starting. Now, to complete our diagnosis of the face, because we've talked about the most important things now, let's just for a second look at the area between the eyebrows and the eyes. Eyelids. You see there's a slight puffiness there? You see that? It's a little bit swollen here. This is the, remember which one that was? Spleen. This is spleen energy is a little too yin. This is her immune system. So her lymph system. So it's important to have the sweets under control, because nothing will make your spleen energy yin faster than sweets in a form of sugar or honey. Even maple syrup is not a good sweetener. It's very high in simple sugars. So our recommendation for sweetener is rice malt or barley malt. Grain malt is also very sweet, so we don't take lots of it. But when we have a craving for sweet, we want sweet things, malt is a good substitute, barley malt, rice malt. Many people are not satisfied with rice malt because the simple sugar content is too low for them. Their bodies are so hooked on fast sugars that it just doesn't give them the satisfaction. So they may have to have a transition period of taking maple syrup or something and then gradually get off that and get more into these, let's say, more balanced sweeteners. So that would be our recommendation. The things I said yesterday about taking discharge kind of foods like radish. You know, it's kind of interesting. In Europe, in any case, when they serve a cheese plate, they'll often have radishes as decoration. You know? And you'll see people will take the cheese, but they don't take the radishes. Mm-hmm. And actually, if you're going to eat cheese, you'd better eat the radishes. So now, because she has eaten lots of cheese and that kind of food before, now it's time for the radishes. So now we're going to start taking radishes regularly. Mm-hmm. And she can even have them daily. She can have it raw, grated as a side dish. She can include radishes, and then in the form of the daikon, long white radish, for soups and vegetable dishes. This radish will be very good for her. Then the shiitake mushroom, we know about that one too. And then for her, very good is a hip bath. A hip bath can be taken with different things. You can make it just with salt, a little bit of lemon. You can make it with dried radish leaves or daikon radish leaves, colt's foot, which is a common weed. You can make it. It's very good. In any case, just with food, it's not going to be enough. But she should do these hip baths, and you can read about them in different books. And there are people here also who know about it and can explain the details of that. So then doing that, then it will go better. And especially being only 23 years old, you still have all of this regenerative power that you can use to your advantage, so that your chances of living a healthy life in the future are much greater than if you would first start this, you know, at the age of 63 or 73. Okay, thank you. So, before we conclude, there's one question. Would you come up to the mic there? We'll take a question before we finish this session.
Assuming that she wanted to have children one day, would her face be able to tell her when her body was ready for that additional stress?
Yes. In this condition, it would be best for her to wait some months, and she can have a very good discharge, bringing her into a healthy balance in a matter of months. I would say 3 to 6 months. So that within a half a year, if she were interested, she could do that, and you would especially see it on the face. You would see that this area becomes clear, the changes that we could see in the coloring on the chin and around the mouth would become more harmonious, and in general you would see that the excess that is packed into the skin would become less. She would lose weight, she would be she would look lighter. Then that's at the point. But it's a good point to bring up in connection with what we just talked about, that for women who are thinking about pregnancy and having children, switching over from the normal diet to macrobiotic food totally is something that is very radical for some people, and especially during pregnancy is not a time to do that. So if you switch over while pregnant or just when getting pregnant, you should be very careful about doing anything really radical, like all of these radish drinks and things that we might do otherwise. We take it very soft. Okay, so that's it for this round.